Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you my review of the new lens from TTArtisan, which is a 35mm F.095. So a 35mm focal length with a huge maximum aperture. Now, this is an APS-C lens, which means that, that effective aperture is going to play out for most camera systems to be more like a 50mm-ish angle of view because of the crop factor of the cameras that it's designed for. Now, I will point out that unlike the 50mm F.095, this doesn't really cover the full frame image circle, which that lens mostly did. And if you want more information on that, you can check out my review of that lens. However, in this case, this is definitely a lens designed for APS-C, and if you put it on a full frame camera, you're going to see this unless you are shooting in APS-C mode, which looks like this. So today, the format of today's review is that I will give you a quick quick review here at the beginning of the review, and then if you want to stay tuned for a deep dive into optical performance, that will come at the end for those that are interested in more information. We'll get to all of that in just a moment. First, a word from our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by Ridge, the wallet redefined. Give your aching rear a break and ditch that bulky old wallet full of stuff you don't need and move to a sleek new Ridge wallet made of aluminum, titanium, carbon fiber, or even specialty finishes like 18-karat gold or Damascus steel. It takes up a little more room than a credit card, has RFID blocking technology to protect your valuable information, and comes with a lifetime warranty. Ridge wallets hold up to 12 cards, and you can customize them with the included cash strap or money clip. Check out their daily drive combos that pair a killer wallet with a matching key case that gives you similar minimalism for up to 6 of your keys. Visit ridge.com/Dustin Abbott and get up to 40% off through December 22nd. That's ridge.com/Dustin Abbott for up to 40% off.
So let me give you some of the basic specs and facts about this. This lens comes to market at about $200 US. It is available for a variety of lens mounts. I have reviewed it on Sony E-mount, but you can get it on things like Nikon Z, Canon RF. You can get it on Fuji X and more, I believe, Leica L. There are some other mounts available there. It weighs in, there's a little bit of variation depending upon the mount, but it weighs in at, we'll say, approximately 250 grams. It is 55 millimeters in diameter, giving you a common 52mm front filter thread. It is only 45 millimeters in length, so very, very compact for a f/0.95 lens. Now, I will note that, as always, I don't love the screw-in front caps. It's just a fiddly process, much more time-consuming. Not my favorite, but that's what we have here on the ground. We have no electronics, no weather sealing. This is a fully manual lens, but what we do have is a focus ring and we have an aperture ring. Now, the focus ring is all made of metal, as is the aperture ring. Everything here is basically metal and glass, very nice. Focus ring moves extremely smoothly. The lens does extend about, it's less than a centimeter in extension. It extends just a little bit as you go throughout the focus range, but focus is very smooth. My only negative that I'll point out for when doing focus pulls is because the lens is so compact, you may find that it's hard to get your fingers in position without getting something in the frame, so you have to be careful about that. The aperture ring is located at the front of the lens, and it has nice defined detents at basically half stops from f/0.95 through f/16, which is the minimum aperture. There are 10 aperture blades inside, and unfortunately, however, they are fairly straight. It doesn't really produce all that circular in aperture, as you can see as you stop down, that you can very quickly see the shape of those aperture blades. Our minimum focus distance is 35 centimeters, which isn't bad, and the magnification I am estimating at somewhere around 0.15 times. And so it's a little bit more useful in that regard than what the 50mm lens was, but certainly not exceptional, even when compared to some other 35mm options. I found that focus was just fine for my applications, and I was able to get precision focus, using the various manual focus aids inside the camera body. So a quick breakdown of the optics, and then of course the deep dive will follow after that. This lens has moderate barrel distortion. It took me about a +10 to correct for it, but it's quite linear, so no major issue there. Vignette was only around 2 stops, which is not bad for a lens with such a large maximum aperture and such a compact size. It has decent, useful center sharpness, and so that allows you to get some, decent looking images even at f/0.95, but contrast is not great. A lot of that has to do with a fair bit of chromatic aberrations that do rob it of of sharpness, and so you particularly see those in terms of the longitudinal type chromatic aberrations. Fortunately, lateral chromatic aberrations seem to be pretty well controlled. Now, the extreme corners are quite soft, even on the APS-C crop, and you can see that they're not really resolving properly. And it's not until about f5.6 and even better at f8 that I saw corners that were actually resolved. And at that point, you can get very sharp images all across the frame. Flare resistance is not particularly strong, and I certainly noticed in a variety of situations that I did get some flare artifacts coming into the image. You can use those creatively, of course, but you're just going to have to watch out for that. And I also noted that one of the primary things that you buy a lens like this for, obviously, is for the very soft and creamy bokeh. And so this lens is in some ways kind of caught in no man's land, in that it's a little bit sharper than what some lenses are at f0.95. So there is some usable contrast there, but also that kind of reflects in the bokeh quality, which isn't as soft and creamy maybe as what you might like. And I did see a fair bit of outlining in a lot of situations. And so I didn't particularly love the bokeh that this lens produced. So in the conclusion, this is a very good value lens at about $200 that is very fun to use. I mean, it's pretty amazing that we can get a lens with such a huge maximum aperture at such a low price. And so if you're looking for a creative lens that you can use that gives you, a decent bang for your buck, it is certainly worth using and, and fun to use in that regard. But I didn't find that it did any one particular thing extremely well. And so it's a little bit too sharp to be fully a dreamy type lens, but the bokeh isn't quite as creamy enough to make it that lens that you just love the overall look of the images, even if they don't hold up under scrutiny at a pixel level. And so for me, it's a lens that doesn't maybe charm me quite as much as what the 50mm lens does. Though, I mean, if you're looking for this focal length and a huge maximum aperture, you can always stop the lens down and get more sharpness if that's what you're looking for there. Now, if you want more information, you can stay tuned for my image quality breakdown, interactive image quality breakdown that will come right after this. If not, thanks for watching. Have a great day. So let's dive into the image quality segment for those that are looking for it.
So first of all, we can see that we have a little bit of distortion here and also some vignette, though not vignette on the level that we saw on a lens like the 50mm. I used a +10 to do a manual correction of the distortion. You can see that it actually is pretty linear, no mustache pattern that's left, so good stuff there. As far as the vignette, it is a +55, and so a little over 2 stops in the corners. Again, not too bad, particularly for an f0.95 lens. So unsurprisingly for a lens like this, we do have a fair bit of longitudinal chromatic aberrations, and those will show up both before and after the plane of focus. It shows up on the chart, but you'll see it much worse if we look at something like this, where you can just see that on these shiny surfaces, there's a lot of, fringing that is taking place. Now, if we begin to stop down at f1.4, we can see things are starting to improve. And then if we move on to f2, we can see, number one, that sharpness and contrast are increasing, and that does, correspond to a reduction of those chromatic aberrations, though we can also see they haven't gone away altogether either. Now, I didn't find lateral chromatic aberrations to be too bad. There is a tiny amount showing here on my chart test, but not too bad. But looking out in the real world here, this is an image that would really show off those chromatic aberrations, and you can see that they're really not present. There's no correction on this, and so that's doing a good job there. So how about resolution and contrast? For these tests, I'm using a 24 megapixel Sony a6400, and these will be shown at a 200% magnification. Now in the center of the frame, other than contrast not being top-notch, there's actually a pretty decent amount of resolution there. Likewise, if we look over here in the mid-frame, it's not looking too bad, but if we look into the corners, we see a huge drop-off to where the extreme edge is really not hardly being rendered, and that's a pretty common trend for some of these recent TTArtisan lenses. If we do a mild stop down to f1.2, we can see that our contrast starts to increase. You can see more of that in the center of the frame. Mid-frame also just a little bit more contrast. You can see the brighter areas look brighter while the dark stay dark. And down in the corner, we can see, well, we've got a ways to go. So f1.4 on the left and then f2 on the right. And so we can see that there is some improvements that are taking place. As far as the corners though, while contrast is starting to increase, we can see that that resolution towards the edges is still off the edge of the cliff. We take a peek on the other side, and again, we can see the contrast is starting to increase, but we're still not getting much in terms of resolution there. We can see by f2.8 there's some improvement, but really it's at f4 that contrast really starts to look good. Mid-frame is looking quite excellent, really excellent there, as we move on. And we can see at f4 we're starting to resolve those edges, but still it's got a ways to go. F5.6 is looking better, but really it's at F8 where the corners finally start looking good. And we can see that now over here on the other side and up in the mid-frame area here, we're really starting to see good looking results here, but it took a little while to get towards peak performance. Now our minimum aperture is f16, and frankly, it doesn't really look too bad. In this case, it definitely looks better than it did wide open, so I wouldn't have any problem saying, use the entire aperture range here, because by the time you get to f16, diffraction is not taking a big hit out of things, and overall it looks pretty good. Now we can see that minimum focus distance, as noted, is a little bit better than the 50mm lens, but we can also see that up close we're really not getting a great performance here. It's just contrast is quite low, and so as a byproduct of that, I mean we've got a not a very flat plane of focus, so we've got a little bit of sharpness right here, but a whole lot of softness elsewhere. Now, in real-world use, this lens can produce better-looking images than what we've seen in some of our chart tests. So, example, this shot of Nala. This is about f1.4, and you can see we've got quite good sharpness there around the eyes and a nice, creamy fall-off both before and after in terms of bokeh. Here around f1.2, and we can see there's a reasonable amount of contrast there. And again, everything is looking quite good in terms of the image as a whole. Now, when you stop down to smaller apertures for landscapes, we can see that right up here into the corner, except for that last little bit, we're getting very crisp looking details, everything looking good. Now, a little bit further back is not as in focus, and so focus is a little bit further forward, and where focus is, we can see that the image looks quite excellent. Now, bokeh quality, we took a look at the apertures before, but here you can see that there's some of that fringing that shows up, but the bokeh circles themselves are fairly soft. There is some deformation, kind of lemon shape towards the edge. We can see, as before, the aperture blades really start to show up as you stop the lens down, and unfortunately that fringing does still persist some, even when we get to a value here like f2. Now, the quality of the bokeh really kind of varies depending on the situation. And so you can see from the shape of the bokeh that I'm not completely wide open, maybe around f1.4 here. And so I've got, decent sharpness on my subject, although you can see there's a little bit of that kind of dreamy effect in the transition on the edges. The bokeh quality overall looks fairly good, fairly soft here. In this image, again, this is wider open. I think this is either wide open or like around f1.2, and we've got a usable amount of sharpness there, but you can also see that some of this bokeh looks it's busy. There's a lot of edges that are showing up. Again, in this shot here, we can see that you got a reasonable amount of detail on the subject, but you have a pretty strong amount of outlining and just a little bit busy for my taste. Now, flare resistance is not high, and you can see here at a wider aperture, there's a lot of veiling, a little bit of ghosting there, and as you stop it down, you can see, you get less of the veiling, contrast increases, but we do start to see some various ghosting artifacts, and those will become, more prominent depending upon the position of the actual sun.
And so as you can see, this is a lens that certainly has some optical flaws. It does have some optical strengths as well, and as I put in the summation before, it is a lens that I don't find does any one particular thing very well, but at the same time, it does have some useful qualities and maybe something that will appeal to you, particularly at this price point. If you look in the description down below, you can find linkage to a brief review, text review, and image gallery. You can also find buying links there if you'd like to purchase one for yourself. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and let the light in.